I am NetMoverSitan. In this, I shall be covering the lore of what was in between Chapter 3.5 and Chapter 4, the mini-episodes. Let us start with the April Fool's Day cutscene. Dante has some strange thoughts, and those thoughts were, we thirst for the 7 sins, we bear the... Then we hear Virgilius's voice, barely able to be made out, saying that it doesn't look like the right wire, asking for anyone. And then Dante was unable to recognize the voice in the air, losing their memory again. And not knowing where they were, then a voice spoke, telling them to wake up, calling them teacher. He was smiling, and had the Star of David on a glowing orange chain around his index finger. There was dozens of desks and chairs. Dante realized that it was a school. Virgilius, noting that dear teacher seems rather confused. Dante was confused about being referred to as a teacher. Virgilius confirmed this, seeing that they forgot all about the explanation that was given just now. Dante played along and then realized that he could hear them. He then spelt out his name and said that he was waiting a long time for their arrival, pleased to finally meet them, refusing to answer questions with the ability of your average career politician. And that destroyed the hope of any actual conversation for Dante. Dante wanted to know why he's acting like this, feeling the sublime terror in their spine. Oh yes, so they still have a spine. As for what Virgilius was explaining, it was to do with their biological authentication. Dante didn't know what he was talking about. Virgilius couldn't be bothered to repeat himself, wanting to move on. Dante questioned that despite being a teacher, they were being looked down on by Virgilius. No change there then. He told them to place their fingertip against his. Then Dante's vision started to destabilize. Then a voice from reality. Virgilius told Ishmael that she simply can't smack a device back into function, telling her to scuttle off to a corner with her ignorance. After that, Dante's vision was painted with a different color. Dante was now being referred to as Doctor. We now see Virgilius with donkey ears, looking worried about them, telling them to hold his hands, which felt like he could almost break them. He was there to rescue them. Dante then remembered that they were a manager, only able to click their clock hands in certain manners. Dante asking who they were. Virgilius told them that they're a member of Limbus Island, like them. Dante was confused as they remembered that they worked for a company, not an island. Then, their vision warps again. Heathcliff asked Faust how that clockhead even works. Dante did little time to devote the thought about that, as the strange voices and unpleasant sights gave way to their vision shifting, and we find ourselves in front of a Virgilius with a horse's head! Easier said than done to keep one's head, isn't it? Apparently, Dante won, who was confused that Virgilius wasn't even human anymore. Virgilius praised Mephistopheles, showing them the way a true ace runs. Dante wanting to know what the was going on. Then Virgilius referred to Dante as their chief trainer. Dante was annoyed that he's not even listening to them anymore. Again, no change there. Asking if they're in the middle of some nest. Asking what's with the horse's mask. As they complained, the real Virgilius asked if what they did to the memory module works. Well, then it became especially painful for Dante. Not knowing why that is, their head was in agony. Then they were in the swirly starscape that they go to when they heal those that aren't dead, referred to a number of different titles. Yes, protagonistic labels such as producer, leader, commander, master, professor, and so many others. Then it started to go dark. Then we see Virgilius, who greeted Dante back into reality. He was getting worried about the executive manager. Then they suddenly fainted out of nowhere. Dante was surprised by this, and was having a panic attack and started running away from Virgilius, telling him to keep away, along with his weird titles that he tried to give them. Virgilius believed that they were sounding like a broken clock. Apparently they tinkered with a number of things trying to fix them up. All they needed to do was just wind that clock. Slightly amused at the time they wasted. Dante noting that he doesn't understand them now. Dante struggling to believe that they're really back. Virgilius only understood that they calmed down a little. According to Faust, they visited a number of mirror worlds in their dream, not considering it relevant now. The sinners left the bus, likely searching for those that won't be missed to refuel Mephi, telling them to get it together and get out to lead them. Dante asking, with all those bizarre illusions, why did Virgilius address them with all kinds of odd titles? As much as they were curious, Virgilius was growing impatient and wanted them to lead the damned dozen. He was wiping grease off his hands. He'd only hear ticking noises anyway. They were just relieved that the Virgilius that they knew was there. Okay, this revealed that Dante can access parallel worlds, although in this case it was due to a malfunction of their head. As for the references in this April Fool's cutscene, they include the following. The first mirror world, where Dante was referred to as teacher, is a reference to Blue Archive, a South Korean gacha game set in an academy city, where the player is there to clear up any issues that appear using violence, with the assistance of the students. The second mirror world, where they were referred to as Doctor, was a reference to Arknights, a Chinese gacha tower defense game set in an dystopian post-apocalyptic future, where people have animal characteristics, which explains the donkey ears on Virgilius, where the doctor was there to fight those infected that can wield magic as a side effect of that disease, along with other governments in that world. Ooh, I'm amazed that got past the censors. The third one was a reference to Uma Musume, a Japanese mobile game where you train and race horse girls with some story thrown in. Why, Japan? Honestly, if that brief travel along the multiverse was any worse, it would either involve a gender-swapped Virgilius or a cross-dressing Virgilius. But that would be going too far, even for the age rating of Limbus Company. At another part of their journey, Faust was calling Dante to attention. It was noticeable that Mephistopheles didn't roar and grumble ahead all day long. An engine that needs rest from time to time, much like Charon and the others still need rest. She seems to not pay attention to her surroundings, but they were all around them, just not as obvious. Dante was surprised by Faust still being awake. This was because there were still things to check due to the engine being treated harshly, so while at rest, it still needs to be maintained, and maintained well. She carried light tools and a small mechanical device in place to have her usual Zweihander. Dante noted how hard she worked. She didn't count this as work. She witnessed her magnum opus being overworked with no time for care. This took a greater toll. She asked if they liked that update in particular. She looked down at them using a handheld device, noting that they weren't fiddling with it as often as they did recently. Dante told her that they were making the most of the new feature that they've needed. When Faust took a break for a routine maintenance, their LCB PDA received updates. This can provide additional functions. In the most recent update, it was a notepad. Dante was surprised that Faust didn't know that. She admitted that there are gaps in even her knowledge. She noted that Dante was trying to write an encyclopedia. Dante dealt with unfamiliar words like fixers and wings, common for them, but not for Dante. Faust understood this, due to them lacking memory of the city. Actually, that might be for the best in some cases. Well, those of you who have been following through with the Project Moon universe so far. So they're writing down stuff, along with copying what they've been writing down on paper as well. This was out of fear that their head might get replaced at any moment, and there was no guarantee that the memories would be retained. This was a backup plan, so that this knowledge wasn't lost again. Now for the mini-episode 2. The bus's back door. Later on, Heathcliff was caught unawares. The bus stopped suddenly without warning. Charon decided that they'd stopped there today, Faust pointing out that they've not arrived at their destination. Missile stating that they're 15% short of the target destination. Considering their schedule, proceeding at least 3% farther would be ideal. Sadly, they go by Charon's schedule, and if she's sleepy, then her schedule is you, I'm tired. Heathcliff understood, But that didn't mean that his anger was less valid, as she stomped the brakes every time. He'd lost count every time she did this. Don Quixote noted that he crashed his nose onto the back of the front seat for the 4th time, meaning the stopping to a screeching halt has occurred 4 times. He loses count that quickly. Charon mentioned that the radio told her to leave the wheel as soon as she felt sleepy. Ishmael understood, but told her to be a bit more flexible. Well, a bit more flexible with that. Honglu, seeing their plain statements as amusing, depending on who said it, Heathcliff happy on this occasion that the minted boy agreed with him, seeing it as funny that the least flexible says that. Ishmael was annoyed by this, asking what's the old fogey that still thinks that she's a wartime general thinks of this. Well, yes, speaking of Ortis, whose anger and irritation was clear, Virgilius was growing tired of this. This was an example of learned fear. When hearing a noise from the red gaze can subdue the entire bus. He was asking why they stopped chatting. There was no reason not to continue. Heathcliff was asking if he was signed to go on a proper rampage after. Apparently he was stretching. He felt a bit stiff. Heathcliff saw this as a load of... Then Ishmael directed their attention to Virgilius. He saw this as laughable. How they behave, like dogs that drool at the sound of a bell. Well, what do you expect? They're mostly the delusional, the psychologically imbalanced, and the emotionally distressed. Professionalism and stability? Well, regardless, he told them that if they have complaints, to take it up with him. His office is in the back and has open hours. He'll make time for consultations. He'll leave the rest up to Faust. She understood. He walked past them, and their piercing stares, with Charon by his side. And both stood at the back of the bus, and Charon said, "Open Perilla." Perilla being an Asian herb that belongs in the mint family. Virgilius correcting her that it's open sesame. She's aware of this, knowing that magic phrases won't open doors. Well, he couldn't argue with her about that. Then a door large enough to fill the backside of the bus slowly opened. Roger was still weirded out by the sight. Honglu mentioning that it's bigger on the inside. And no, it's not the favoured space-time transportation of an eccentric space hobo. It's a corridor. A splendid, narrow, deep and spacious hallway. An endless corridor that looks like it went on forever. Far into this, classy poles demarcated the end of the area that they were allowed to traverse, standing in front of the unending lines of red lights. It was as comfy as it felt eerie. Gregor asked if this was one of the singularities belonging to a wing, asking Faust if she knows anything. She knew of this, but she couldn't speak of them in much detail. Gregor thought that she could have put it nicer. Ryushu was aware of the existence of the corridor. Faust confirmed this. Gregor couldn't deny this, and Ryushu then said, IF, which is unlikely to mean, I'm... Gregor was too tired to deal with this, telling Dante to hurry on with it. This snapped them out of idly staring down to the edge of the passage. Faust understood that this was an unnecessary repetitive act, but it's the executive manager's approval that's a vital part of the procedure. Dante didn't think that she needed to put it like that. He then went into official mode and confirmed to them that today's close of business for the sinners was in effect. Faust then reminded them that they have a maximum of 12 hours to sleep and rest. The duration is subject to change. Likely under circumstances when they're under attack, need to do a mission, or something else that would interrupt this. After that, they walked down the corridor with groans and sighs. Gregor making his tiredness clear, Don Quixote wanting to play chess with Sinclair. He declined politely. She always runs to Yisang for hints whenever she's losing. Yisang corrects him by saying that it's because Don Quixote was placing the pieces incorrectly. Sinclair saw this as worse. Missalt said bonsoir to Dante, and thanking them for today's work. As for tonight's watch, Dante thanked him for suggesting, but they weren't feeling sleepy. Then Ortiz reminded them that she's always willing to stand in for the night watch duty, if they were ever feeling fatigued. Roger didn't take this seriously, suggesting that babushka, de camp, to get inside. A babushka meaning old woman in Russian. Ortiz protested at this, at this hard daytime work for them Then Ishmael was unconcerned, wanting her to go to bed, escorting Ortiz there with Roger. Only Dante and Faust remained. Faust was relieved, as had they not forced her to go to bed, she'd have nagged them for night watch duty for quite a while. It's not the first time this has happened. Dante asked if this was the case, after they all go inside. And Dante then asks about the door, where it leads to a different space each time it opened. Faust confirmed this, where as long as they were in the right mental condition, the door will lead to lodging appropriate for rest and personal use, although they looked like jail cells the last time they peeked through the window. She insisted that it would have a place for sleep, showers, self-care. Faust understood that they had other questions besides that. Dante asked what was beyond the demarked place. Faust advised not to be curious about that. She walked down the corridor, not giving a real answer. Has she honestly never considered trying to be in a position of power and authority? For all we know, she might have done. We don't know her background yet. Dante understood that she knew more than she was saying, and she doesn't always say what is needed. Perhaps she understood that, they'd find out eventually. Finally, we have mini episode 3, Beyond the Bus's Corridor. A week after this fruitless exchange, Dante said that they hereby confirm today's close of business for the sinners, and Faust then told them that they have 12 hours to use as they see fit, unless something else, more urgent, requires their attention. The others tolerate this ritual, but this time, Heathcliff acted noticeably different. Ishmael asked, "What now?" Roger told Ishi to leave him be. It's not the first time he's been that grumpy. She then told Heath to simmer down before going to his room. His grumbling kept her awake. As for their rooms, they reflect their state of mind. At least that's what Dante was made aware of, where the floors, walls, and overall ambience are shaped after each sinner's personality. The view changed depending on their emotional state. Heathcliff's frequently emits wuthering and stormy sounds. Wuthering Heights. likely representing his anger issues. Faust is likely well-ordered. Honglu's is likely something that reminds him of home. Thankfully, such a place doesn't exist in reality, because if it was attuned to what was in my head, it'd probably be something out of a heavy metal album, mixed with being in a Doom game. Yeah, my head is that much of a mess. Usually Heathcliff would snap back with, "Why should I?" But he was largely silent. He stood in the corridor while the others, except Dante and Faust, went into, their rooms. He stared down the passage with a frown, Dante thinking that it was stress relief. Then the incident happened. He asked, "What's with the doors down the aisle? The doors beyond the no trespassing line blocking the way." Faust recommended against walking farther into the corridor than necessary. That made it more suspicious to him. Faust didn't see it as such, that he'd be better off listening to her. Heathcliff believed that treasures were kept there, and this resulted in him doing something that Faust didn't want him to do. Yes, it's that bad. With Faust telling him not to do it, he'll regret his action. And this emotional outburst caught his attention. It's like she's hiding something. He sprinted down the corridor before any could stop him. Faust did not take this well. Dante asked what was in there, but before she could answer, Heathcliff was screaming in a way that told them that he already regretted his decision. Faust told them to take her left hand and run with her. Dante was unsure what she meant, but she told them that she won't be able to get him out in time on her own. She might even be engulfed herself if she doesn't act quickly. She ran off with Dante following not far behind. They crossed the line and proceeded deeper into the corridor, coming across a three-way crossroad. Dante heard screams coming from the middle. Faust went to the left aisle, Dante questioning if this was the right way. She was sure. Then she chose the right path, understanding how the corridor works better than Dante. Then she entered the fifth door on the left side of the hallway. Then, as Dante entered, another hall came into view. The end was like a cliff, more like a gravitational pull trying to get them to fall to the end of the hallway. Then they saw Heathcliff, who was crawling towards them with all his might in the middle of the hallway. Clearly the laws of physics as we would know it don't all apply there. Heathcliff didn't understand that place. In the dark, behind him, there was a presence in it. Dante asked Faust what was over. Then she interrupted Dante and told them to hold the knob of that door tightly and firmly grip her hand as well. They did so, although they questioned if that part of the corridor was tilted, as if they felt like they were hanging off a cliff. Faust then told them that they were in a corridor, telling them not to let go. She then extended her Zweihander with her other arm, telling Heathcliff to grab onto that. Heathcliff questioning her sanity, as his hand would get cut if he tried grabbing onto that. She told him that it's better than what he'd suffered down there. What the is down there? A concert with the worst performers in human history, whose songs were cursed since their creation? Well, thankfully Rick Astley won't be down there, if that's the case. Heathcliff decided that he'd rather not know what's down there. It was painful to him as it was. Faust then told Dante to pull him up. They were successful, although he was unconscious. They took him back to the main part of Mephistopheles, Dante supporting his arms while keeping his head from dragging along the floor. Faust was relieved that they didn't lose him in a deeper area. She told him to rewind the clock, Dante asking, if he was going to be fine. Faust believes that the psychological damage is likely to be severe. Well, if it will be, then their work will be encumbered if he loses his mind. Who knows? It might make him nicer. Just look at Don Quixote. She's already lost her mind. Faust appreciated his assistance, although it was unfortunate that they lost a portion of their limited break time. Dante asked what was in that darkness. Where did it lead? Could she tell them, as they've experienced more than they did previously. They wanted to know what was after Heathcliff. Why did it never show itself to them, and why did it vanish instead of chasing them further? Faust either didn't know herself or she wasn't authorized to tell them. This honestly didn't surprise them. Then Ryushu said that the corridor... UIF. She passed them with her death stick in her mouth. She must have left her room while they were saving Heathcliff's... Although Faust did say one thing. Dante did prevent a sudden vacancy in the bus departments, so she can tell them one thing. Now this had Dante's attention. She told them that when they traverse a road that they never walked before, what do? Dante said use a map. Faust confirmed that they were right, although even if you don't have a map, the brain forms images to serve as one. The starting point and destination clearly marked. The return trip can be traced back using that. She hoped that this was made clear. This confused Dante. Faust then told them that this is why they should remember where they started in the corridor, especially when a door was opened. Faust was tired, so she went to her room. Dante wasn't surprised by this point. Personally, I think she'd get on with the Riddler. They continued with their electronic notebook and went back to piecing together what little information they collected. Next I shall be going over the notes that Dante has written so far. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!